So welcome everybody to webinar number 2 in our series on human trafficking, sexual exploitation, and conversations vital to be had in Canada. I'm Kelly Tallon Franklin from Business and Professional Women Canada and International, and a Courage for Freedom founder. And my colleagues will be introduced as we go. I am really pleased that you're here with us this evening. This is being recorded, and it will be posted up on the BPW Canada website because our president made it our business that this is a priority theme for our club. Our host club is Bowmanville, and so we appreciate their support. Our moderator is Tina Jordan, and we also thank President Carrie Andrews and all the club members of Bowmanville for making this happen. Tina Jordan is an expert and as an HR director with a natural talent for people and problem solving. She might need that tonight if I'm looking after the chat. Everything is solvable, says Tina. She loves the hustle of her career, supporting people and companies daily, growing, mentoring, and leading. Tina grew up in Oshawa and started her family in Bowmanville, where she's lived for 20 plus years now. You never know. We need to talk to you about skincare later. Tina has 3 children. One is an RN living in North Bay. Number 2 is in her 3rd year of nursing at Nipissing, and her son at Fleming for skilled trades. Tina is now in the 2nd act of her life as an empty nester, and now has time to dedicate to advocacy and humanity. Tina's hope is to leave the world better than when she arrived. I'm going to turn it over to Tina in one moment, but I just need to acknowledge today is actually Red Dress Day, and it's a day to honor the lives and remember families that have carried loss for generations, also known as missing, murdered, and Indigenous women and girls. June marks 5 years since the release of the final report with recommendations. And I want to show you behind me on screen that the report included 231 calls for justice, of which only 2 have been completed. So for those of you that are resolution writers in BPW, I hope you're paying attention. The other thing that we need to note is those that are from Indigenous communities are also 6 times more likely to be murdered than any other women or girls in Canada. That is our responsibility of those that live on the land. We need to be responsible to help fix that. So we needed to acknowledge that this evening. And so Tina, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Kelly. So we're going to start this evening with the land acknowledgement. So today, with great reverence, I acknowledge that we are meeting upon the traditional lands of Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit people. For thousands of years, traditional people have been the keepers of this land and have preserved it along with the animals and the natural resources. It is with respect that we recognize their 7 grandfather teachings, which were given to these traditional people to help them live a good life, respect their creator, Mother Earth, and to respect each other. To cherish knowledge is to know wisdom. To honor all the creation is to have respect. To walk through life with integrity is to know honesty. Truth is to know all of these things. To know love is to know peace. To face life with courage is to know bravery. Humility is to know yourself as a sacred part of creation. As settlers, we also acknowledge our role in the impact of colonialism to the traditional people of this land. So that is our land acknowledgement. Thank you for that. And then next, we are going to introduce our panelist and speaking order. So first, I'd like to introduce Jasmine De Fina, an accomplished human trafficking consultant and advocate, currently serves as the executive director of Safe Hope Home. With extensive expertise in human trafficking, Jasmine is renowned for her impactful contributions to educating frontline workers, government leaders, law enforcement, and the public. Her efforts focus on enhancing understanding, support, and collaboration in addressing the challenges faced by survivors. Faith is the cornerstone of Jasmine's work. As a devout Christian, her love for Jesus fuels her passion for advocacy. Jasmine also cherishes her mixed heritage with Métis, French, Irish, and Scottish ancestry, rooted in Northern Ontario and Quebec, which further motivates her in this cause. A sought-after public speaker and expert panelist, Jasmine regularly shares her insights on platforms like CBC News, Global News, the Toronto Star, and radio, amplifying her advocacy efforts. Proudly married to Onofrio and mother to two daughters, Isabella, Eliana, Jasmine gracefully balances her dedication to advocacy with the blessings of family life. So Kelly, would you like me to introduce everybody, introduce Bridget as well, or wait until she speaks?
I think that'll be easier because then we can just turn the floor over and do a continuum of speaking.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Yeah. No problem. So I'd like to introduce Bridget Perrier. She is a prominent Canadian activist and survivor of sex trafficking, known for her relentless advocacy for victims and survivors of commercial sexual exploitation. Born and raised in Winnipeg, Manitoba, she experienced exploitation and abuse at a young age, leading her to become a powerful voice for those who have endured similar traumas. She is a co-founder of sex trafficking survivor-led organization Sex Trade 101, dedicated to raising awareness about the realities of sex trafficking and advocating for the rights of survivors. Bridget's advocacy work focuses on addressing the root causes of sex trafficking, including poverty, systemic inequalities, and lack of support for vulnerable populations. She has been instrumental in shaping Canadian legislation and policies related to human trafficking, bringing attention to the need for comprehensive support services for survivors through her work. Bridget has challenged societal perceptions of prostitution and worked to demonstrate the interconnectedness of sex trafficking, exploitation, and gender-based violence. As a leading figure in the Canadian anti-trafficking movement, Bridget has been recognized for her dedication and commitment to empowering survivors and driving systemic change. She has worked with government agencies, law enforcement, and community organizations to develop strategies for combating sex trafficking and supporting survivors in their journey towards healing and recovery. Bridget's advocacy extends beyond Canada, and she actively engages in international dialogues on human trafficking and supports global efforts to end the exploitation of women and girls. Her tireless efforts have made her a revolutionary leader and activist in the fight against sex trafficking, both in Canada and around the world. In order to fully appreciate the history, scope, and impact of Bridget's work and life, we encourage you to visit her Wikipedia page. Thank you, Bridget. That's amazing. So moving on to Kelly Tallon Franklin. She is an award-winning speaker and advocate on the issues of human rights, justice, human trafficking, sexual exploitation, and trauma therapies. As Chief Executive Director and visionary founder of Courage for Freedom, she has a personal story of overcoming violence, drugs, and incarceration, suffering, coercion, and exploitation, stripped of dignity and hope. She fought resiliently out of childhood sexual abuse, gender-based violence, and survived sex and labor trafficking. Fierce and tireless, Kelly found the strength to launch an incorporated registered charity in 2007 and developed coalitions and task force teams while remaining connected to frontline support needs to stay relevant and leading. Notably, Project En Route, Project Maple Leaf, and Project Enter Inclusion. Focused on community work in all regions of Canada and now the globe, Kelly offers training, education, awareness, and care to women, girls, and their families, utilizing her intel and procedural knowledge of how advancing the rule of law demanding government will requires intelligence, focused, actionable advocacy. Her passion led to involvement in high-level meetings as a business and professional woman, international United Nations Standing Committee co-chairperson for Human Rights and International Anti-Trafficking Task Force that reaches over 107 countries. Kelly is a former OSCE, ODIHR, ISTAC consultant and newly appointed core group executive of NGO Caucus, Europe and North America. Kelly is called on during inquiries and trials as an expert witness in multiple countries. Kelly provides a distinctive viewpoint drawn from her extensive involvement in more than 850 survivor, exiting, and support initiatives. Amazing, Kelly. This perspective integrates historical lived experiences with current trends in human trafficking. With best-selling book, accolades, and high demand from global speaking invitations, she offers accurate information to focus concerns and solutions in interested communities. She is a team leader and mentor developer who brings panels, events, and working groups to life. Amazing women making a difference in the world. Thank you to all of you. So at this point, I would like to welcome Jasmine to the floor. It is all yours, Jasmine. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for having me here today, Kelly and team. It is such an honor to be here with you this evening. And thank you for the lovely introduction. So I was asked to speak a little bit about the homelessness issues that are, currently prevalent in Ontario specifically, and how they're affecting survivors of human trafficking. And I think, I do all my speaking engagements. I like to highlight language and how important language is. And I don't love the word vulnerability, but we know that there are certain factors that lead individuals to be more at risk, to be preyed upon for human trafficking. And homelessness is one of the major issues that we are seeing folks faced with, especially these days with the rise in the costs of living, and when folks have nowhere to go, traffickers are able to swoop in and provide them with a place to live. And so, we have this housing crisis where it's taking 2, 3, 4 years for individuals who are already accepted on a special priority housing list, especially in the Durham region. It takes years once you've been approved to get housing. And so oftentimes we're having to send individuals outside of the region, away from their community, away from their connection to supports, away from the people. Like I shared, like Bridget was my person. If you shipped me off far away from Bridget, I don't know that I would have been okay, right? So, highlighting this topic is really important. We need to keep survivors close to their communities, their people, their friends, their groups that are supporting them. And so when we're having this housing crisis and having to ship individuals out to, way up in the north or down by Niagara Falls, it becomes really difficult to continue to support, which then increases the survivor's risk of relapsing, going back to a trafficker or the same trafficker, because they're, that trauma bond, they're looking for somebody to support them, to be there for them. And so the housing crisis is huge. Another, aspect of the housing crisis that makes it really difficult is that shelters are now full. And it's really difficult for survivors of human trafficking as it is to get a shelter bed, because it's the VAW, or the Violence Against Women shelters, that are mandated to take on survivors of human trafficking, because in homeless shelters you can't be fleeing violence. But survivors are not being accepted into these shelters. They claim that they are accepting them, they're getting the funding for survivors, but they're not taking them. And if they do, they're kicking them out because the trauma, it's difficult to deal with all of the stuff that comes up, and the shelters just aren't equipped to handle, the trauma responses that, the typical expected responses of trauma that survivors are bringing to the table when they're brought in. And so it's just exacerbating this, homelessness issue for survivors. So they can't get on lists. Once they do get on a list, if they're fortunate enough, it's taking a couple years to get a place. And then, shelters are not accepting them. And so we have these survivors with these precarious living situations and limited access to resources. And so they're at a significant risk of going back to the trafficker, right? They have no choice almost but to go back to the trafficker because that's how they're surviving and having their basic needs met, which is one of the biggest things that we talk about when we talk about, how do people end up becoming trafficked? And so it's really a really important issue for us to be talking about and to raise awareness for. And it's one of the biggest things that I'm actually working on with Safe Hope Home as well. We have 6 beds and 1 transitional apartment. We do get some government funding. The rest is through philanthropic dollars. But we are Canada's only survivor-led long-term recovery program. There are only, a handful of recovery programs across the country. And most of us only have 6 to 12 beds tops. And so, with that being said, and, Kelly was pointing out just some numbers of individuals that are being trafficked within Canada. There's way more survivors looking for beds than there are beds available for survivors. And so we're looking at, how do we create emergency shelters for survivors? How do we expedite this housing, special priority housing for survivors of human trafficking? And it's just been a constant battle. It's been a difficult one, but it poses an even more significant impact on our marginalized communities as well. We talk about Indigenous women and girls. It's even more important to keep Indigenous women and girls connected to their culture and their communities where they feel safe and, they have those supports. But, when we have to pull them, out of their communities and bring them down south, we're essentially delivering people to traffickers. And so those are some of the topics that I wanted to bring up. But another really big issue that we're seeing with housing is the legal side, and which I hope you can continue next week when you have the legal talk. But a lot of people, once survivors get, portable housing benefit, which is supposed to be being canceled, but some awesome survivors out east are fighting for it and got it extended a little bit. But the portable housing benefit is when you can take, you get the rent money paid to you and you can rent from a place within the community. So a lot of people don't want to rent to survivors of human trafficking. I remember when I was getting out and I was calling Bridget, like crying and screaming and swearing. I don't know how she handled me, but I'm like, nobody wants to rent to me. I'm a single mom and I had a Rottweiler. Nobody liked my dog, but my dog was my everything. He was my support person. He made me feel safe. And people wouldn't rent to me because I was a single mom, and I didn't, tell people I was a survivor of human trafficking when I was applying or putting in my applications, thanks to Bridget, or I might have. I had guidance, I had a support person, but a lot of survivors don't have that. And so they don't know how to fill out the documentation. And, there are not very many people who want to open up their homes to them, or their basement apartments or their rental units, because they fear traffickers coming after them, or, substance misuse happening in their places, and, all kinds of things, people working out of their places. And so it's almost like, a lose-lose for survivors of human trafficking. It's almost impossible to get a place. I actually had to, unfortunately, lie and use people to help me to pretend that they were going to live with me and to sign for me. Otherwise, my, brand new baby and I would have been homeless, So, for me, I'm very passionate about the topic of housing. And so I want to thank you, Kelly, for allowing me to talk about it. And I hope we can have some conversation with the questions a little bit later on. But those are the main issues that I wanted to highlight for you folks and bring to your attention as it relates to the housing issues for survivors of human trafficking. And that's all the time that I've been allotted. So I'm going to pass it on to Bridget to open up about her topic. Thank you.
I muted myself. I have my needy dog right now sitting on me, wanting his love for the day. So I guess mine was around the Indigenous issues and like, well, it's Red Skirt Day, and I'll just let you all know that services for Indigenous women are really, 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 really hard. I have went through being an Indigenous woman. I've been able to get some services my own self. I got supportive housing, which was number one, and I got it scattered, which is rare to see. But we with that, living in scattered housing, I avoided having my children exposed to like public housing, Toronto housing, and that was a boost for me. Another thing for me was getting my children the allocated help that they needed. And, you know, like Jasmine said, oh, I'm going to be invaded by my granddaughter. You know, having that support. I never, ever, ever thought that my children would be exploited or anything. And just this past few years, my youngest daughter had was, you know, starting to slip at school. She was diagnosed with Asperger's, and I had reached out and did everything, but you know, single mom in the work that I'm doing, I'm not making an executive salary. You know, I think one year my income was $30,000. Also, I was able to secure, under Jordan's principle, her having get, you know, assessed, which led up to a diagnosis of having Asperger's, high functioning, awesome girl, a little bit like her mom, kind of, you know, kind of wild. Anyways, she struggled, and later in life, those services weren't for her, and with homelessness, they had put her in a hotel. She had decided to move out of home, and like, you know, 18 years old, you're not going to get a 1-bedroom condo downtown Toronto. So and it was pandemic, so she went into the hotel program. She insisted. We were like, no, 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 don't. And they seen the niche, Native girl. Mom kind of has a background. She went into Native Child. First transition home she went into, I had to take her out of. Middle of the night, I got a call, mom, it's bad. She was at Dundas and Shooter, and I went and got her, moved her back home, said, you know, like, we're gonna do this over again. She was exposed to drugs. Didn't want to listen to what was going on here, and for my own sanity, new grandchild was born too, brought into the home. She ended up you know, insisting on going back into the shelter, so-called, you know, basically it was a hotel, a big party for them. And we ended up fighting. My other daughter ended up securing, she worked for ANWA, Anti-Human Trafficking Crisis coordinator. So we ended up getting Soleil the COB, the supplement, the housing supplement. I ended up lying, getting her, you know, well, not lying. We ended up getting her a work letter. She secured an apartment on Dawes Road. I saw the mental health aspect. I was concerned. I saw drugs were starting to get played in. We were on alert. Very hard when you're the one that everyone comes to you for questions and it's your own child. And I will say Native Child was not helpful. They enabled a lot of the BS. We did bottom lines. She called my partner, my spouse, in complete panic, and said a name. And my partner was like, uh-oh, we're in big trouble. Phoned me, said, Bridget, do you understand who this person is? I was like, and it was a pimp, a drug pimp from Sherburne and Dundas. He had had the ample opportunity to get into Soleil, exploit her budding addiction. My partner at that time was like, what do we do? Do we go? And I said, you know what? We're going to get her into treatment. We're going to get her into recovery. We got private funding to get her into treatment, which cost $30,000. Her sister was able to get it for her under human trafficking dollars and expedite that. And with that, Native Child stepped in and said, you don't need to do treatment. What's wrong with you? Mind you, she's been pregnant with this pimp. She's told the mental health worker at Native Child, I'm being trafficked. It was starting. My daughter knew well. She knew what the next step was because he was giving her mass amounts of drugs. He had gotten her pregnant. I got her an abortion. And, it was something that, I knew this guy was going to put his hook line. He had 49 kids, 68 years old. I knew she was in danger when she knew something about he had killed. I actually was told by the streets, he's murdered before, get your daughter away from him. He's super dangerous. And we had, I know all the cops. I know everyone. And I was in panic. And we had her a bed, everything. She was leaving to go away for treatment. She was able to secure a bed. We had and Native Child broke it down and said, you could do treatment here. You can do it in Toronto. We'll help you. You don't need to go away. And it was all over funding to keeping they needed their stats filled, right? So one day Soleil came home and said, Ma, she was here. I was sick. I had my granddaughter. We were both sick. I was crabby. It was July. She had a dog. She was doing good. She had her apartment, which was a 10-minute walk from my house. Her sister my daughter lives right around the corner. And she came here and she was like, Mom, like he wants me to get rid of my dog, and the dog bit him. And I was like, no, dogs read energy. He's not a good character. And I was like, you're not giving up that dog. That's your family. Did I give you up? No. Did I give up your brother? No. And I adopted a little boy. I'm the first survivor to adopt a child, another Native baby. And she was pleased with it. And this people need wraparound services. I understand, like, as someone that's worked in this field, I knew we were in trouble. I'm going to say, I know my instincts. Something wasn't right in my life at that point. Battling, with my own health issues. She was here and I was irritated with her. She had eaten, she was showing me the drug, the addiction, manic addiction behaviors. And I was frustrated. And I remember she said, okay, I'm going to keep my dog. And she was so proud. It was check day. It was July 31st this summer. And I said, so are you going to go to treatment or not? Because she had gotten into a program. working with EC, but for kids with special needs. And that was this girl, if she could get working with handicapped kids, she was off. This is how vulnerable they are. Like, he knows who I am. He knows her mom's no bullshit. Word on the street told him, you stay away from that woman's kid. She's a mama bear. You don't want to start with Bridget. She went to see him that night. And I remember just, like, you know, she left the house and came back in. And when you come into my house, I have 2 little ankle biters. They bark like nut bars. And I thought she was coming back in to ask me for money. And I looked at her and I went, what, Soleil? And she said, I just want a kiss. And I gave her a smooch. And I said, I love you, poo head. And she skipped out of my house with her dog. And she was supposed to come home Thursday. And she didn't come home Thursday. She was supposed to be back here to take the dogs to the groomers, and she didn't. I figured end of the month, party hardy. It was Caravana. If my dogs bark, sorry, everybody. I hope they don't. They bark whenever my son comes up and down the stairs. Anyways, Friday, I was notified, and I'm going to tell you guys. Friday, I had a knock on the door. Toronto police. They didn't even have the balls to come to my door. They came to the end of my front yard, and my niece came back in and said, Auntie, the cops are here. And I went, what are they here for? I thought for my son. He's mouthy, he's 12. And I went outside and I said, what? And they were like, I said, Peanut's not here. He's at summer camp. So what's the problem now? And they asked me, are you Soleil's mom? And I said, yep, I'm Soleil's mom. And they said, when's the last time you seen her? And I said, Monday. And they said, that's impossible. She's dead. Oh. And there was no, Bridget, do you have someone? I don't even remember. My niece said, I remember at that moment, the earth stopped. But like, it was like stuff like that. I'm laying on the grass screaming bloody murder. And it's like, oh my God, I'm a woman that fought for, and I remember telling my daughter, don't say we're Native. Because, you know, I'm going to tell you guys how Indigenous women are treated, especially when they've been exploited. We're problematic. So whenever there's a problematic Native girl, I get her all coming to me. Okay. Nobody can handle Native girls. Like, they don't know, you know, and I understand it. It's layers of intergenerational stuff. It's in our epigenetics. I always say it's in our DNA. So my daughter's standing there and she just tells the cop, go. I'm lucky. My son's grandfather is a trauma expert. So he called and my community rallied, and Marissa Crocos or Freedom, she jumped in a taxi. She told her and her husband were out, and she said, I got to go to Bridget. And my daughter had been murdered by him. He had urinated on her. She had rotted. I told the detective basically, he goes, I don't understand. Like, you know, I had to go through everything. I've been through everything. Buddy's only been charged with leaving her. It's a suspicious death. We don't even know what day she died on. I refused to let welfare pay for her funeral or victim services. I paid for it, a crowdfunded, you know, it had, my band gave us some money. I lost my mom 2 weeks before her. I was in mode. Even now, you know, like, I'm not working frontline right now. I'm just doing community involvement. But like, I can go on and on and on what the problem is for Indigenous people. But what another problem, what I see, and I'm going to be honest, is organizations like huge organizations, ONWA, Native Child, NWAC, all these huge organizations that have the great funding writers, grant proposals writers, they pay people, and they have EDs making 150,000 plus 200 to 200,000 a year, are the problem. If the government was smart, they would say, you know what, we're going to keep it, we're going to really watch this, and let's look at the proposals, and let's, get immediate housing. We need housing. We need 3 siloed things for anything. And I'm not just talking about Indigenous survivors, for any survivors. It should be immediate, which is, the extraction, the recovery time, the immediate. Then it should go transitional, where, it's long-term. And then it should be retentive. So what would be like, once they're in university, and always to be on them. Problem is, right now we have an opioid crisis. We have a crisis, really in the Native community, of a lot of nepotism, a lot of lateral violence. I'm still going out to communities where they say, oh, this isn't affecting us. And then as soon as I start talking and I ask them, is there a drug? Are there addiction issues? Is there this? What's the crisis? We all know who the pill dealer is. We know who the bootlegger is. And it's the same issue, the same issues. I could sit here and talk about policy development and all that. But it's just the same old, and it's the same old stuff, same old people sitting at the table. Survivor leadership is really, really needed. But we have to be really careful. I had a survivor call me about victim service, the survivor that they brought that sat there and talked about her shit for 2 hours, and overwhelmed the survivor, the victim of human trafficking, that went, get this person away from me. And, that was a huge issue. So we just have to be really, really understanding and meet people where they're at. I have my my one survivor. She's going to university. She's leaving her trafficker, and so far she has $35,000 banked that the nail tech took from her. She sees my nail tech, and she's banked every wax, every nail she never paid herself for doing, and we have $35K. And she was asking me, how do I apply for OSAP? And I said, apply for OSAP, get it. She got it. And then I told her, well, I have $35,000, a gift for you. It's actually your money we banked for. And she's leaving him come August. And, we're going to have to see. There is supposed to be the selective housing where you can go and get them. They're supposed to be bypassed, but there's so many hurdles for it that we've told the ministry that's not going to work. So I don't know what to say about that. It doesn't work. I wouldn't feel safe putting a girl in the hood that's been trafficked in the city of Toronto. I know that they're supposed to have selective services, or even in Hamilton or wherever they want to go. It doesn't work. It doesn't work good. Scattered housing, I always say, is the best way to go. Smaller, transitional housing, but I don't feel good with sending them to certain orgs. if I've had problems with them, my girls always have problems with them. So it's a lot of, you got to trial and error. And like Jasmine said, it's, a lot of, I'll tell you this, mentoring Jasmine and many other young women, I never got a dime for it. And I wouldn't expect it. It's just, if I really wanted to tag on case management, I don't think there is a cost to it, right? So we have to look at that. What I would love to see are more resources, women in business that would want to mentor women. I have a girl that does beadwork that I'm like, this is showmanship. If she could sell that and have that, that mentor leadership and that step up, I'm sure she would soar. But, that's what's needed, regular people saying, this isn't working. We need to go back. I'd also like to see women who have experienced exploitation, and not women that have taken their pimps or put them away. Any experiential woman receive free education. If I could send women to university, I can get them out. I could get them out of poverty. It would open so many other doors for them. So, I got girls that have taken out student loans to pay their pimps. Because you can get a 50,000 OSAP loan or 49,000 out, and they just hand it over to the trafficker. I wish, we can go back and, get that sorted out for them, because it really sticks them when they do want to rebuild their life.
Bridget,
so with that, I'm sorry I haven't
No, you have lots more time. Bridget, it's really difficult to listen to you, knowing you, and knowing that this is like a tip of the iceberg in your knowledge, in your experiences. And I just want to share personally that, Jasmine and I were both crying because we have been with you quietly and then reaching out to you in one of the most difficult times that we can't even imagine. And that you're willing to come here after losing Soleil and dedicating your life. And I met Soleil. I met Soleil when she was younger and you were speaking in London. And she was arguing with you, and I gave her something to do to help me. I'll never forget her. She was smart and she was sassy and she was beautiful. And so that's who I hold in my heart when you're talking today. And we just want to say thank you that you still are here fighting, first of all, for yourself. Because this extra level of grief is something that none of us can tell you how to go through. So much respect. But I believe that what you're carrying in your heart is for the benefit of women and girls in the future also. And so we are inspired by you that you need to continue to take care of yourself, your grandbabies, and even the children that you lost at a young age to cancer, those that you decided you'd become a stepmother to after all the effects of Robert Pickton and what happened. It's just incredible, your measure of resilience, and it inspires me to do the work. So I'm an emotional wreck because you're talking, but I also want to say to people that are listening tonight, you need to understand how real this is. We, as survivors, we don't polish it up to tell you things that the government would want you to hear, that the television likes to censor to hear, that the communities want you to hear to make you feel more comfortable of issues of trafficking that happen in sex industry. So I know there's lots of questions, and there's a couple in the chat that I've already brought forward for Tina. So Tina, if you just want to thank our two panelists, and I'll try to pull myself together, because
Yeah,
I don't even think I can read my own notes right now. But these are good tears, and tears are healing. And one of the things I remember, between Bridget and I going out eating food, laughing and crying together, it was one of the best experiences I had when I was embraced by the survivor community, and was able to share my truth within safe circles and in a way that wasn't competitive. So miigwech. So Tina, take it over for a minute.
absolutely. So I want to thank both Bridget and Jasmine. Thank you for your time this evening and everything that you ladies do, and your passion, the amount of people that you've saved and influenced. And I can't even imagine how many people you've saved just on educating people. There's no words. Bridget, what a speaker. My goodness. Thank you. Thank you. I also want to thank Kelly. So Kelly, as our BPW Canada VP and Human Trafficking Task Force chairperson. Is there anything else, Kelly, that you would like to add before we
see all this stuff behind me? Whoa, we can't see properly. Let me see. So see that 67% in Ontario? BPW Canada and all of our friends, you need to listen up. I want to let you know that we need to be aware of the numbers. Okay, they're important, but sometimes the numbers start us arguing about where the money needs to be spent in the provinces and what needs to happen. One of the difficulties is that that number, 67% of all the trafficking that's reported, and believe me, it's a grossly underreported crime for lots of reasons. And the Canadian Centre to End Human Trafficking would tell you statistically that it is not service and support people that are actually inspiring survivors to report. They're self-disclosing. They're learning to self-exit. And a lot of times it's because of survivor networks, community networks, people that understand this issue, that they're able to work with to find their path themselves out of human trafficking. It is not all the money that's going into policing. It's not all the money that's going into community education. Although all those things are helpful, they are causing the community to have more information. We have a 40% population in Ontario. We are 40% of the population in Canada. And yet we are 60% of the trafficking. I can tell you that Bridget would also tell you, and Jasmine, because they also stand as expert witnesses with some of the other survivors that we work with all over Canada and globally, that Ontario has passed a bill, 41, that helps those survivors who have had what Bridget expressed as coerced debt to be expunged. And we fought really hard. The program is now called the Reclaim Project. I was there as part of the survivor panel to rename it. And it is helping to take that financial burden off of survivors whose pimp might have taken $50,000. I'm a historic survivor, and those things happened to me. And it took me until my mid-50s to pay out a student loan that I never actualized, pay off credit cards that I never saw, pay off cars that I never owned. And so those are the things that we've been working on. And with BPW Ontario, we took a delegation actually to Queen's Park, and we were there the day they announced on the floor. And the next day I was there as an expert witness and saw all my colleagues there, because there shouldn't be somebody in the room that's 62 years old that's still struggling financially because they were encompassed with a debt that they did not benefit from at all. It was criminal. So the next set of work that needs to happen in Canada is an understanding that there is success in Ontario, and there is a strength in Ontario with the strongest strategy that needs to transcend. So this bill 41 is not a federal bill, and it hasn't been adopted in provinces. So BPW, you need to pay attention. Here's your resolution writing that every province in Canada has to adopt an expungement bill for coerced debt, bondage during human trafficking. It's something we need to do. We need to transfer to Canada more of the awareness and the victim forward willingness that we are seeing in Ontario. It's not that our numbers are more horrific. They are, because we have a higher population. But last week we read that 2 girls were coerced by pimps from Moncton, taken out of Ontario and taken over. We just completed a case that has just hit the papers, that there are 10 victims that have come forward in London, that there is a high-level trafficker that was involved in lots of other things. So we need to understand that this victim forward willingness, so we can't look at British Columbia and say, we don't need what we have in Ontario there. We do need it, because the numbers in British Columbia will go up. The numbers in Atlantic Canada will go up when we create the environment that is victim forward and there's more willingness for disclosure that can happen outside of just police and becoming a witness. It shouldn't be a carrot that's dangled in front of a survivor in order for them to find housing, to be treated fairly, to have a basic living wage, opportunities at education, and ongoing support and healing. So I want you to think about the map, and I want to ask yourself this question: not where are they disclosing, but actually, where are victims from? Where are they sold? And where are they en route to and from? And when we think of that as a whole set of challenges to us as an organization, we're going to help. We need to frame our thinking into what Bridget already alluded to, into the stages of trafficking. So when are they at risk? When are they transitioning into trafficking? When are they entrenched in it? And when are they transitioning away? The biggest problem for the public is actually knowing the signs, because it's not about signs. You've heard it from Jasmine, you've heard it from Bridget, and survivors will allude to this. It's not enough to understand, to know the signs. You have to understand the underlying behaviors. So when people call in, even the human trafficking hotline, they will tell you they often get a call. On the TVO series that was just done with Steve Paikin and our colleagues, Cassandra Diamond from Bridge North, and also those from the London Police Department, were sharing. We're often asking ourselves the wrong questions as the community that wants to help. So when you call in, you don't know the big picture. And the problem is we need to get ahead of this into prevention to get our eyes on the big picture sooner, because the looks are deceiving. And if you're not trained, you will not know the smoke and mirrors that are being used. And the crimes are primarily perpetrated by men against women. This is the gender aspect of violence that we cannot ignore organizationally. It's against women. Gary Bezaire just recently shared, as a London human trafficking police officer, that in all the years he's been called to cases, he has never been called to a place where there's a male victim or a female buyer. I am not repeating that, but you need to understand what that means to our response as an organization responsible for the safety and equality and opportunity and prosperity as our mission and mandate for BPW Canada. Lots of times, Gary would also say that he has been involved in what appear to be female traffickers that are found to be what's known as a bottom. And I'll leave my colleagues to give this some description. Maybe Jasmine, you can start with that. And who have endured what's known as Stockholm Syndrome. Now, let me tell you, as academics, people can go onto podcasts and blogs and come into rooms, and they have all the academia to support that this is legitimized work. But I'm going to tell you that Jasmine's famous saying is, you go and suck dick to pay for your rent. And then you tell me how friggin' empowered you really are. And I'm sorry, Jasmine, I stole your thunder, but I'm the one that swore. The crime is often excused by those that are academic and think cerebrally they know this issue and have never had an interconnectedness in this, in a bodily experience, that it's excused as choice of women, and it's held up by foundational beliefs of misogyny and patriarchy and even colonization into the devaluation of women and girls, that this is the best, excuse me, fucking choice we have to offer them as a society. The issues are not discussed. Men are predominantly purchasers of not only sex, but children. And the power, prestige, and privilege is often excused, or it's paid away. Mariska Hargitay just spoke for Variety and won an award when she said one of the most difficult things she ever went through is watching the Weinstein case get turfed and turned over, because those in the legal realm that have no idea of what some of the rules of law or their criminal laws do to prevent prosecution and justice, that the Me Too movement and having that many women's voices was actually what was blamed by the defense lawyer. So we need to work on the prevention of and remedies of a human trafficking act. The one in Ontario actually helps survivors to find legal support, like an amazing, incredible woman named Kelly Beale. She's not with the Crown. She doesn't work for the province other than they pay her paycheck to work for her clients who are survivors. She is not obligated to talk to the police. She is not obligated to talk to the housing unit or victim services or anybody else that we line up at the door to throw at survivors who cannot navigate wraparound services. They cannot. They need a survivor to system navigate with them and say to people, no, you got to back up. The survivor can only manage one thing at a time, or you're going to send them flying back into this, because the way you're treating them is not based on what we were told in 2014 by our governments, that this needs unilateral care. It needs specialized care and treatment that extends past gender-based violence. So please don't let the government officials in the future start to pocket that money together between gender-based violence and HT, that they made the commitment through their national and regional strategies to segregate out for specialized care because of the nature of the crime. We failed those that are survivors. We failed because the promise in Canada is safety. Well, the second promise under public safety, it's safety and it's happiness, which is really funny. Survivors don't find any of their situational things to either be safe or happy. And it takes a lifetime to find it. So I want you to note that there are no lawyers in any provinces that are available for survivors other than Ontario. Okay, BPW, let's go. We have advancements. And in our current laws that everybody is challenging and everybody has a friggin' opinion about, let me tell you, opinions are like noses. Some of them are ugly. But we've seen those arrested and criminalized before, like myself, like Bridget, like our friend Sandy Diamond, and maybe even our friend that's on call with us that's a survivor tonight, that we would have been arrested. We would have been arrested and have arrest records for prostitution that would affect us. We can't cross the border. We can't get jobs. We can't rent houses. The same with our credit. It's the same. So under C-36, which Bridget fought for, Bridget brought a pimp stick and scared the bejesus out of everybody to tell them if they wanted to legalize this, this is what they could expect. These improvements have been here in justice because those under C-36, whether they claim to be under agency in the sex industry or prostituted through traffickers, are not criminalized. And that's an improvement in justice. It would mean that the girls and women we work with now are not being charged and thrown into jail. And by the way, they can be recruited in jail. So there's progress made. So Tina, I'm extremely over time, but I appreciate the opportunity to share. And I'm going to turn it back to you to go to Q&A.
No problem. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for educating us. Again, thank you to Bridget and Jasmine as well. So we are going to move on to the question and answer period. Kelly, I know that you were going to filter through some of the questions. However, would you like me to go through the list of questions that I have?
I'd like to first turn it back to my colleagues and say, Bridget and Jasmine, is there anything after we're speaking that just went, oh, okay, I forgot this, because this is Survivor Brain 101. And you guys can jump. And then if there's anybody in the chat that you're watching, Tina, and then you can bring up some questions. And we're going to go on as long as people want to be here. Probably till 8:15, if that's okay with my panelists and the moderator. So Jasmine and Bridget, if you want to unmute, and even if you dialogue with each other and we dialogue together, that's kind of how we roll. So I can see Jasmine's ready to unmute. Bridget's ready to unmute. There's no neighbors yelling at Bridget, so we're good to go.
Still on mute, Bridget.
Bridge. 1 minute.
1 minute.
Jasmine.
So how about Jasmine?
Jasmine, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, I don't know if everyone can see in the chat, but you brought up about choice and sex work, and is it really a choice? And I just wanted to highlight, because when I was first coming out and being mentored by Bridget and her colleague, they said to me, a choice is only a choice unless you're given an option of equal or greater value. And that just really stuck with me. And so that's something that I like to share with others as well, because like you said, I mean, it's not very empowering. I love how you shared my quote.
Sorry, I just had to. I knew you would.
Yeah. And, I get challenged a lot by, academics who, and I do often say that, because, the whole industry is exploitive, and, whether it's the strip clubs, the massage parlors and so forth, every single person is exploiting you. And it's not an empowering career choice. And the other thing that you talked about was the bottom, and you asked me to highlight what a bottom was. And so that essentially means the pimp's main girl, the person who is making the most money, the most loyal, been there the longest. And a lot of times the bottoms, not always, but a lot of times the bottoms are coerced and forced by the traffickers to recruit other women. And again, they're criminalized for that as well. But, talking about being criminalized, and I remember, working in the clubs and, hiding from the police because all of my friends would be getting arrested. I hid. All of my friends would be getting arrested for doing sex work, and nothing ever happened to the traffickers. Nothing ever happened to the people buying sex, paying us to do whatever they felt like doing to us, owning us for a minute, an hour, 30 minutes, whatever they paid for. Nobody ever got penalized except for us, those of us who are being, used and abused. Yep. And so I'm glad that you highlighted that. And I'm forever grateful for Bridget and her colleagues and everybody who fought for that bill. And it's
Jasmine,
like pushing away.
I wanted to ask you a question, because I know you're in the grind, your boots on the ground. You see women and girls that might have exited like yesterday. And so one of the things I'd like to ask you is, what are the trends that you're seeing in the expectation of what buyers are demanding from women and girls that is more violent and more egregious, other than what's now known as airplay And that's what they're calling, you know, permission to pay a girl to strangle her.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had friends die at the hands of not pimp, sorry, the buyers. Actually haven't had a friend die at the hands of a trafficker other than Soleil's Soleil. Yeah, I have had friends die at the hands of the people buying sex. And you know, they come in all shapes and sizes, doctors, lawyers, police officers, government officials. I said it. You know, that's who's the people with money, the rich white man. That's who's, in my experience, buying sex. And they're paying us to do things that they would never imagine doing to somebody who they had respect for or who they cared about. And they are, wanting, I guess I'm going to get vulgar. They're paying, like you said, to choke you, to strangle you, to slap you, to beat you, to aggressively assault you.
Insert.
Yep. And
force you to perform while you're menstruating.
Yep. Well, I mean, I feel like that's a given. Like, yeah, everybody has to work when they're menstruating. Come all over your face, like choke you, and with their penis until you can't breathe and you're puking all over, and then make you clean up the mess.
And I'm sorry for the graphics, people. We don't want to pornify the issue, but we are so restricted in what we talk about, so we don't pornify the issue, that sometimes we're not holding the buyers responsible for the violence and the aggression in the acts itself. And how many young women and girls have you had the privilege to support that can tell you that their buyers knew that they were underage?
Oh, they could tell. They could tell by the way your body is. It's not even that. It's the condomless lay, the extra $100. Can you do it free? And you know what? Even the ads, free, condom free, blah, blah, blah. Like, who's making that decision? And like me and Jasmine can go on. Kelly, the smell, the smell. I hate the smell of men. I have a son that he has to live a clean life. Even my oldest son, if he has BO, I flip out. I'm like, go take a fucking shower. Like, I hate smells, body hair, everything. Like, the men don't care. There's the Invisible Voice on Twitter. They have where John's say SW had miscarriage all over me. I like the gush of the water. Like,
okay, we're done. My people here are just gonna not sleep tonight, girls. And these are conversations that I can tell all my colleagues that are on call right now, that as survivors, we need a safe place to talk to each other about this. It's not the academic that got hired in at victim services. They hire survivors that are well-versed. Often.
So I can talk to that too, though. They hire survivors, but there's still so much red tape. The government hires survivors. The government makes this like round table. The victim services hire survivors, but like oftentimes we're just there as a token. We're not there because they're actually listening to us.
So they're not allowing us to be at the front end of the conversation, to lead the activities and formulate the plan as being vital to the solution. They're just tagging us on to what they already want to do. Would that be what it is?
Yeah.
Sorry, Tina, we're just rolling.
I think like you guys,
they want to make sure we're if we speak up, we're unhealed. Yeah. We're angry. We're unhealed.
We're troublesome.
So I think, you just have to, like, for me, I remember like just sitting there, and it's like, the Charlie Brown, wah, 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 wah. Sometimes I just think of that, like, and it's like, but academia, like, I'll tell you, when I was out on High Truck, we used to have the academics come up and ask us about sex work and that ideology. And you guys got to understand, the sex work, like, came, that industry, the sex worker, that whole terminology came from the porn industry. We understand porn as living documentation, living, accurate, internment, documentation on the war on women. It's not a metaphor, it's a real war.
Yeah.
What happens in porn isn't what's happening in our intimate space, right? We don't do that with our husbands. But so they've depicted sex work. Well, if you're going to call me a sex worker, call me a retired testicle engineer. And I've done that. That's how I shut them down. As soon as I tell them, like, I remember Bill C-36 being out there in the Red Umbrella movement. They had like speakers and
Lobby
all
money. They are so well funded.
They all had umbrellas, and it was in front of Parliament there in Ottawa. And I'm thinking, oh my God, and there's me with survivors. I met up with a grandmother, Gladys Reddick, and another Indigenous activist, and we had two hand drums, and we outdid the Red Umbrella movement. The only time, and I was telling, the only time the radical feminists moved together with the conservatives, was the creation of Bill C-36 was a moment in women's history, in the women's movement. It was a beautiful movement. It was the real Nazi, the left-wing lesbian, lesbians and the evangelicals,
everybody
the Catholics,
came together.
Everybody came together to fight the legalization of prostitution. We fought it. That's history. And nobody even the Native women were in on it. We all sat at the same fucking table. And if we don't, and then when that came through, it dissipated. Why the stats aren't right across Canada? Because BC government doesn't follow. They don't care. They don't care. They're not telling you. When a woman dies, it's an overdose.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All of them. They're all labeled.
They're all labeled overdoses.
Also, they're not actually following that bill. They don't charge the jobs.
No, the police are not policing to the law. So that's another thing.
They're not allowed.
As organizations.
They get slapped on the wrist.
Yeah, because the chiefs of their policing units
are
allowed to make the call whether there's actually a charge laid. And the other thing that's going to get discussed in our next heated version, and we might bring back our two panelists to just kind of cross-examine some of the legal friends that we're going to have in, who actually are kind of on board and on our team when it comes to ending the violence against women and girls, especially on this today, Red Dress Day, and we're honoring that day today to say no more stolen sisters, no more trafficking of women and girls, men and boys in all their diversity. We are not exclusionary, but we have to speak to the fact that over 96% of those trafficked are women and girls. We can't ignore the statistic. So Tina's probably got some questions. So Tina, and you're going to have to jump in with us because that's what we're like. You should go to a restaurant with us. The waitress can't even come.
No problem. First of all, I just want to say, you guys are saying, sorry about the graphics, but this is the truth. You're speaking the facts, the truth, you're being real, and we can't fix the issues if we're not real. If people don't know what's really going on, they have to hear the gore, as you would say, to make an impact. So thank you for telling your truth. So I do have some questions here that I'm going to, provide to our panelists to answer. So
I'll encourage the panelists to give short 2 sentences and then pass it on like we're sharing popcorn to make sure we can get to the questions. Okay, Bridget and Jasmine, good? Okay, let's roll.
Thank you. So why is separating human trafficking support from other gender-based violence supports and housing necessary?
Well, it's easy to separate it because I always say human trafficking is like domestic violence on crack. You know, if I'm going to take a human trafficking victim, place her in a DV shelter, I'm placing any young woman at risk by putting that client in that DV shelter.
Yeah.
And I can attest to the fact that if you actually look at the diagnostic tool that we prescribe to and all the academics follow, that there's a second set of traumas and needs for especially the mental health and the complex trauma care, PTSD, that isn't managed or navigated by gender-based violence specialists. And all of a sudden, when the human trafficking money came out in Ontario and every province, all these people that were specialists in trauma hung a shingle on their door that they're now human trafficking trauma specialists. So I also want to say that if you're on call tonight and you're from the community where Jasmine is, she needs help. How much of a percentage that you need philanthropic money? For me, the work that I do, the amount of work that I've done with BPW Canada, internationally, and in Ontario has taken a lot of my time away to fundraise for Courage for Freedom because I'm not funded. I'm not funded by any government organization, and that's why I'm a little bit of a threat, because I have an unmuzzled mouth. And that was by design after I met Bridget.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. The ministry won't fund the live-in home. So we don't call it a residential program anymore, the live-in home. They won't fund it. They'll fund the day programs and a tiny fraction of outreach. And our outreach is when we go into the community. So we go all over Ontario and Quebec actually and meet survivors where they're at and help them. Like Richard said, like do case management, get them the reason, like whatever they need, we go, we're there. And I actually replicated that program based on what Bridget did for me, except my team gets paid. I'm sorry, Bridget. But not much. They're basically volunteers, but they do get a little bit. And that piece, the government won't fund that, but they do fund a little bit of programming. You know, and I think it's hard for me because it feels like it's, you know, to create these like contributing members of society. And so that's like what they'll pay, but they won't pay for the house where they live, and they won't pay for the food to fill their bellies. Like OW has not increased in how many years, like they can't feed themselves or pay for a roof over their head. And so that piece is all covered by philanthropic dollars, and it costs us about $300,000 to $500,000 a year. And that's all fundraised.
And so don't just go to your local human trafficking support place and hand them toilet paper. I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. Give them money so they can raise money. Give them gift cards that they can use for things that they need urgently, because when somebody needs to exit and they need to throw away all lingerie, bras, and underwear, and we need to go to Walmart and get them new shit, because often girls are forced to share clothes or wear somebody else's clothes that somebody else has, you know, done up a client in. That is not cool. One of the things we do at Courage for Freedom when we help support exitings, first thing we do is go underwear and bra shopping. And believe me, the relationship, and, you know, both Bridget and Jasmine can attest to this. When we can give a survivor the ability to choose what her underwear is going to look like, to let her decide what food she's going to put in her mouth, because she might have only eaten grilled cheese in a hotel room for the last year, or what color nail polish she's going to be able to put on her fingers and toes, you would not believe the sense of self-efficacy. And it's a really strange feeling for survivors. And Bridget and Jasmine, you could speak to this too. They're not used to having control over anything. And so for us in government programming and in supports to keep telling them what to do, they often are very frozen. And they don't know how to make decisions. And I remember a friend years ago, Kat McLeod, told me she didn't know how to do her laundry or pay her bills because, you know, key parts of her life were stolen when she would have had supports that were different women and girls in her life that taught her how to be a mom, how to keep a house, how to budget, you know. And so we can't assume, I say, you know, sometimes those that are very Puritan and don't understand that the issue can be that we need Catholic support services, we need Christian support services, we need Indigenous support services. We helped put Muslim support services and shelters all over Canada now, so that they're able to go and find support in their communities and still feel safe. We can't have it just be exclusively one way. There needs to be all those multiple options for women and girls. So Tina's probably got another question.
I do indeed. Okay, ladies, what have you experienced or witnessed that is detrimental in the anti-human trafficking efforts and is still happening?
I'm going to weigh out because I would be here all night. You might want to reread it.
I will do so.
No, I get it. I totally, no. I'll say what they're still doing. They're still re-victimizing victims. So once that initial report goes in, and let's say we've removed them from the situation, I got, she shouldn't have to tell this victim service worker, that victim service worker, that ODSP manager, that OW manager, then the Crown attorney, then the detective. Like, the detectives will phone them like 30 times and interview them over. It should be one interview, let them rest for a week, have that one person at contact, but it's not like that. They still get over and over and over and over and over and over and over. They get hassled. And that's one little itty bitty thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's huge though. I agree with that. We see that over and over, and I don't understand how we're not at the point where we can have victimless cases. Having to testify destroys people's lives. It's really difficult for a survivor to go through that process and relive it all over again.
So there is legal precedence that when somebody has experienced a crime of torture, and so that's why we're working on bills to change laws to start to look at laws on what's called non-state torture, that trafficking is actually a form of torture. And so if we can change those laws, the cases that there are survivors, and believe me, they are victims, then they're survivors, then they get to pick whether they're a witness. It is their choice, and often they are coerced into making the choice with dangled carrots and promises about how the trial is going to go, how easy it's going to be, how many supports there's going to be for them. And meanwhile, we're seeing ankle bracelets cut off. We're seeing pets being killed. We're seeing girls being threatened with death, and even seeing girls killed. We're seeing judges throw cases out because we have a judge shortage in Canada. So we get to the point of trial, and a woman or girl is held on for 18 months without the support that they need. They're told they're supposed to heal and start their counseling. And basically, we pay for 3 months worth of counseling, really. And cases take up to 365 days longer than murder trials. And yet the money we have, the support we have, do not match the length of time that we expect a survivor to endure, re-victimizing themselves with all of the things that Bridget has said and Jasmine said. Okay, next question.
Yes. So, ladies, what should women's organizations do to advocate for human trafficking?
Get properly trained.
So how do they find proper training, Bridget? Give them because there's
I wouldn't do it off
there's
NCSS. Get a survivor run organization that offers training and pay that trainer. Like, truthfully, I won't come in unless I'm getting like a lot of money, but you take my training, you know exactly what I say. And also hire experiential, hire people, put them on the board, have an experiential board, have experiential people that work there, because no one's going to understand at 12 o'clock midnight if that girl wants to go back to her pimp. I understand it many times. Ask Jasmine, I've talked her off the ledge going back. You need that. You need that it's like specialized care.
Mhm. Yeah, I never would have worked with anyone other than a survivor ever. Bridget was the only person that I ever would talk to or trust, believe, right? And like I have a good relationship with my officer, but it's not the same. Like there's nothing like your survivor sister. I wouldn't talk to him about those kind of things. We need survivors, but not just in front lines, also in leadership.
Yes. Making high-level decisions, advising our governments before they start a program on whether it's actually a program that survivors would recommend before they decide where the money's going to go and how they're going to roll it out. And so one of the ways that that needs to happen is we need to have independent monitors. We need specialized rapporteurs that are not picked by the government, but are picked by survivor tables. They need to be picked by the survivors who have skin in the game to actually do the work, but aren't necessarily being controlled, because more and more the government will be listening to the same places that Bridget was talking about, the big box stores that are already getting the money for the programs. And Jasmine, you could speak to this. So how easy would it be to speak against the way a government is going when they're the ones that are funding you? When you know that it's harmful to survivors, what happens? So should those that are receiving the biggest amounts of dollars and that are, they have to toe the line or they lose their budgeting, should they be the survivor leader organizations that are informing policy?
No, it's still a very corrupt colonial system. They pay me, but I said it. I'm also a big mouth. No, a lot of times I feel like they just have us as token survivors, but we get attacked, and our funding gets cut if we speak out and ask questions, or
So there's actually some information that also is good and available that talks about survivor hiring from OSCE. And Bridget was part of that first cohort along with Trisha Bapti. And then I got to come in the second cohort and tighten up some of their documents. And I had to do, thanks, Bridget, you left me all the legal review. And that's why I dropped off the manual for you. It's fatter than a phone book. And it's actually available to any country about how they need to do this and how they can go outside of kind of favoritism within survivor circles, organizational circles. And it's going to take a while, but if we don't do it now, we're just going to keep paying the same people to do the same things and expect different results. And so who are the crazy ones? Okay. I think maybe we have one more question. Or
we have 3 minutes left, ladies. So one final question. If you could talk about the link between porn and the demand for sex buying. Kelly, you're on mute.
I think we talked about this.
It's super linked. While most of a lot of the Johns would play porn before they go out to buy the woman, a lot of the sex acts are what their little hamster brains seen on the porn. They'd want to emulate it. So it plays a huge role. Huge role. And I think Gail Dines has done a study on it. So yeah, she's pretty cool. I beat up Ron Jeremy and was charged for it.
So was her book called Pornland?
Yeah.
So if you want to read about this, Gail has done incredible work and is listed as well in Wikipedia and is a leading expert in this that's trusted by survivors in her conversations. Good.
Well, and she's good. If you ever met her, you'd think she's Mary Poppins. She's tiny. And she's mouthy, so I like her, but she's someone I didn't see, I really respect. Also, I think Melissa Farley, Dr. Farley's done some studies.
Yes.
So those women, who else? Rachel, not Rachel, Rachel Moran wrote a book about it, but another, Robin something, she did another study. and Gloria Steinman have done stuff on it. There's lots of stuff, World Without Exploitation, and that.
It's good.
Sorry, noisy.
Okay. Tina, do you want to bring up another question and we can round out? And this will be a to be continued for our next series. And we're going to hear from the Ontario Deputy to the Crown, who Sue Orlando, who's going to be in, along with some OPP specialists that Jasmine knows, that Bridget knows, that I've actually worked on live cases with and been able to assist in, somebody from Victim Services, and then hopefully Kelly Beal will have time and energy to talk to us to help push us to understand what it's going to take that every province will have a lawyer available. So Tina, you have the floor back, and then you can close off for the evening.
So did you say you wanted me to ask another question?
Yes, one more. Let's do
All
it.
right.
While I have
more.
these two women here, I could go all night, but maybe that's the
Okay.
after party.
All right. How can organizations ensure they do not mistreat survivors in Canada?
Jasmine, you take that one.
Oh, that's an all-nighter after party for sure. I mean, there's so many ways, but I think one of the biggest things, like Bridget said, number one, being Indigenous. Like I grew up, my mom told us, you don't tell anybody you're a dirty Native. That wasn't just in our childhood, that's even prevalent today. So, you know, the subconscious biases, people need to get educated. People really need to get educated in this area specifically, even for our Black women as well. Yes. We have these unconscious biases, and you know, if you don't educate yourself, it comes out in how you treat people. But also, like Bridget mentioned as well, get educated about, you know, human trafficking. Really pay attention to language. Language is a big thing. The language that we use, you know, we can, you know, hurt people without realizing it. And that was a big learning thing. Even for me as a survivor, right? Because certain words didn't hurt me, but it does others. And so being very mindful of the language that we're using. Yeah, I think those are my biggest takeaways.
So for me, one of the things is to create a space where you give opportunity for the survivors to lead. Sometimes we might take a little longer to answer a question, to submit something. I tell anybody working with survivors, our clocks are broken. We have, historically, survivors have a terrible time with time. We show up late, we come way too early, we talk too short, we talk too long. We sometimes take a longer time to answer emails, but our brains are always on fire for the reasons that Bridget and Jasmine have shared. We haven't had choice like those in gender-based violence have had, that we're going home to the same house every night. And I know, and I'm not speaking against gender-based violence. Please don't hear what I'm not saying. I understand, especially during COVID, it was especially egregious because women were trapped in home situations, and that was the adoption of the folding and the thumb to make the signal, to signal that somebody needs help. And we use that in human trafficking as well. However, women that are experiencing gender-based violence usually know where it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, who it's going to happen with. Very often, it's in their home. It's one person that is their partner or somebody that they know. But in human trafficking, we're subjugating persons to multiple rapes by multiple people in multiple locations. So we have to understand that there is a huge difference. And organizations need to understand this. And I'm really imploring us all to fight that the money does not get lumped together like a BOGO or a 2-for-1. That the government is going to say they're going to give all this money to the gender-based violence organizations that are now saying they're all experts in this, and yet they're still having to look after all the gender-based violence issues. They can't possibly do both unless they doubled their funding instead of just piling it over from human trafficking efforts previously. Would you girls agree with that? That it should not be all lumped together so the government can save money? And to tell you that survivors have done our communities a favor. We have worked for free at our own expense. It has cost our families and our friends. It costs our associates. We are paying the price sacrificially to do the work. It's the responsibility of the public. So we need you guys to step up. So Jasmine and Bridget, you have any last thoughts? And then Tina, you can close with your thoughts.
Well, I'd like to just say miigwech for having me. Sorry about my grandchild. She's like classic being a pest, being Riot. They forgot to pick her up at 6. So yeah, just thanks, and I hope you guys.
Her name is Riot. Did you guys pick that up?
Yeah, her name is Riot Rose, and I always say she's quiet Riot, and her native name is Storm. So
Bridget, what is your Indigenous name?
Waseakwe.
And what does it mean?
Woman of light. So yeah, that's my name. And then my daughter's name, Briar, would be Nigegons, is little otter, and the baby Storm. And my son, we don't know what his name was because his bio parents weren't sober when he was given it, and the guy died, so we have to get him renamed. And Soleil was Sun Woman, Jesus Quay. Yeah. So yeah, our names are very, very sacred to us. And I've mainly have just decided since my daughter died that I really have to help my people and take the lead over. And that's why I've just been doing consulting with First Nations communities and First Nations people, because, that's where I'm needed. And, I'm hoping to get in the mining industry to train them around the harms around sexual exploitation and First Nations. So especially with all the payouts, we're in trouble.
Yeah. And for the last sector that we're going to be doing for BPW, we're going to talk about industries and the intersection between migrants, refugees, Indigenous, mining camps, labor camps, and how that intersects with sex trafficking. And Bridget has an incredible story of what has happened to her on ships and through smaller communities in Northern Ontario. So Bridget, with you, I'm just going to tell people to keep following you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm on, I think I'm now on TikTok. My kids made me get on TikTok. So yeah, so just keep me on and keep me in your prayers and that. And like what Jasmine said, if it wasn't for faith, people ask me what keeps you going. If it wasn't for my love of the creator, my culture, I don't think I would have gotten through this last thing. So, and I know, I always say, like, I will pillage on, I will keep it going. So thanks for having us.
Okay, so I just want to thank some people, but starting Bridget, like, never apologize for being a mom and a grandma. I think that this is what women doing work should look like, right? Like, you slayed it. You had your granddaughter, you had some things to do outside, and you did not miss a beat. So this is what accepting women look like, right? So thank you for that. So I want to thank the BPW Bowmanville, Carrie, our president, and all of our members. I'd like to thank the chat moderator, Kelly, who's on double duty tonight. I would like to thank all of our attendees and encourage you to join the fight and educate yourself, as these amazing ladies have said so. And also feel free to join the BPW Bowmanville. You can Google us and find us, and, support Safe Hope Home, follow Bridget and help her in her crusade as well. It would be amazing. I want to thank Kelly, and I want to thank the national and international task force teams. and our esteemed panelists, which as we know is Bridget and Jasmine, for their transparent dialogue, as well as Kelly. And then I will pass it over to Kelly for her final comments.
I am overwhelmed because I'm in my safe space with this community of women, and both ways, both with BPW and with my survivor sisters. So what I encourage you to do is to continue the conversations and ensure that academia does not cancel our voices, that if they would like to be informed, we are available, and they will have permission to share our lived experiences when we know we can trust them. Because these are not stories. This is not a fairy tale. It's actually, they've actually been nightmares for most of us. And now that we're on the other side and we're operating in freedom, we have the courage to speak. So I ask that you would respect survivors. You would understand that you're never going to understand us. We never want you to have to experience what we've experienced, but we want you to ensure that we are believed, we are supported, we are remunerated, and we are placed at the front as survivor leaders, because that's who we are. So thank you everybody for tonight. Thank you, Tina. We're like trying to navigate barn kittens and you've done an excellent job. And we're just really grateful for everybody this evening for stepping in. And we look forward to the next conversation we are going to have that has to do with legal all the way across Canada and where the gaps are and how BPW can continue this conversation. Good night, everyone. Take good care.